It honestly blows my mind that people still don't get this. When a nation stamps its flag with a symbol that carries thousands of years of religious, cultural, and ancestral weight, it isn't random. It isn't some exotic borrowing from halfway across the world. It's deliberate. The Nazis didn't flip through a Hindu prayer book and say, "Hey, let's steal this foreign peace sign." That's the popular story, and it's nonsense. What they actually chose was the so-called swastika, or the fylfot in its Germanic context. A sacred symbol tied to Odin, to Thor, and to the ancestors of Northern Europe for well over 1,000 years. In other words, they were literally trying to make Germany Germanic again. The swastika shows up everywhere in Northern European archaeology. Bracciates, fibulae, runestones, jewelry. Some pieces even inscribe Odin's name right next to the symbol, a direct ancient link between the Allfather and the swastika. It wasn't imported from India. It had its own Germanic meaning. It represented good fortune, prosperity, and sacred blessings. It represented divine connection, tied to Odin and Thor, marking things as holy and protected. And it represented power and protection, carved into amulets, weapons, and runes to ward off harm and amplify strength. So, no, it wasn't foreign, it wasn't random, it was Germanic. Fast forward to the 20th century, the association between Odin and the swastika didn't suddenly appear in 1933. In 1919, a German book on Odin called The Song of the Allfather shows the god with his ravens, wolves, serpent, and swastikas. In 1927, a painting in the British Parliament depicts Viking banners falling in battle, marked with Odin's raven and a swastika. Both of these came before the Nazis rose to power. Both show the swastika as a Germanic religious marker tied to Odin. So, when the Nazis chose it for their flag, they weren't inventing something new or borrowing from India. They were reclaiming the symbol of their own ancestral gods, their own culture, their own past. And here's where people miss the forest for the trees. You can't call Nazi Germany Christian while ignoring what was right in front of your face. The national flag carried Odin's sacred mark. Christianity is Jewish at its root. A Jewish God, a Jewish Messiah, Jewish disciples, Jewish scriptures. And those scriptures don't just disagree with paganism, they demand its eradication. The Bible literally says to tear down groves, cut sacred trees, smash idols, and put entire nations to the sword as a burnt offering. A holocaust to the God of Israel. Yeah, they used that word. So let's be clear. Christianity once set out to annihilate Germanic culture in the name of a foreign god. The Nazis, meanwhile, plastered Odin's symbol on their banners, revived ruins, seasonal festivals, and ancestral traditions, and rejected Jewish scripture. Which part of that looks Christian to you? Truth is this, the Bible itself already laid out that exact playbook thousands of years earlier. Look at Deuteronomy 13 through 14. It commands you to kill your own family if they worship other gods. Stone your friends and neighbors if they suggest ancestral traditions. Exterminate entire towns if they resist. Put every inhabitant to the sword, even their cattle. Burn it all as a holocaust to God, leaving the ruins forever. And why? Because the God in their story, written by them, conveniently chose one people as his treasured possession above all others, Jews. That's not metaphor. That's the foundation of the faith that later marched into Europe, the cross in one hand and the sword in the other. So, when Rome, armed with this faith, marched north, what happened? The sacred groves fell, the temples burned, idols were smashed. Priests slain, survivors bent to servitude. This wasn't gentle conversion, it was conquest. A spiritual colonization carried out in obedience to those biblical commands. Fast forward to today, and people still wave Christian banners as their heritage, blind to the fact that their real ancestral symbols, the rune, the sun wheel, the swastika, and so on, were demonized, outlawed, or coupated. They've been taught to see their gods' marks as evil while bowing to the foreign god who once ordered their extermination. And here's the bitter irony. In the 20th century, a regime openly said, "Let's make Germany Germanic again. Strip away the politics, the atrocities, The noise, the core impulse was about reclaiming what had been buried under centuries of domination. That fact alone terrifies people. But ignoring it is historical blindness. Because until you admit that Christianity's rise in Europe was built on a holocaust of the pagan nations, you can't understand the bigger picture. You're missing the conquest that mattered most, not just on the battlefield, but in the soul. And here's what should be the obvious truth. If you see a giant crucifix on a flag, you don't conclude they're Buddhists. That would be insane. Yet somehow people see a flag with Odin's fylfot and twist themselves into knots claiming it was Christian. It makes no sense. The swastika was chosen because it was romantic, because it was Odin's, because it was theirs. And if you can't see that, you're not just missing a detail, you're missing one of the most important truths of European history. The swastika was Odin's mark. The Nazis knew it. They put it on their flag. That wasn't Christianity. That was Germanic. Everything you've been told about that whole period in time is a lie. They weren't the ones persecuted. It was us, by killing our own people in the name of their God, based on some bullshit they wrote.